My name is Dan Grabois, and this is a new podcast called The Dig. And in The Dig, I will speak with interesting people and dig into interesting things that they are thinking about, that are happening in society, or that they are working on. And my very first guest today in episode one is my colleague Jon Nelson. Hello, Jon.
Hi, Dan.
Thanks for joining on episode one. This is very exciting for me.
Thanks. I think it's appropriate you asked me to maybe dig the grave of the podcast here on the first episode.
Well, we'll see if we make it to episode two. So today we're talking about our group that we play in together, well, that we used to play in together. You retired from the group very recently, the Meridian Arts Ensemble, which is a brass quintet plus percussion. And we have just, as of 3 days ago, as of January 16th of 2026, released a new album. This is it. Let's see if I can get this into focus. This is called the Zappa House Concert, and this is a recording of a concert we played in 1996, and I'm sure you can remember back that far with a little effort, as can I. And we played that concert in the house of Frank Zappa, in his recording studio, the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen, for many members of his family and invited guests. So, do you have anything you want to say, first of all, just generally about anything before we dig into some questions?
Um, well, just to thank you for the work that you did on getting this thing out of a box of CDs and tapes that Ray left with me and up to, a released archival recording. So thanks for doing that.
You're
It's a
very
lot.
welcome. Very welcome in this. The disc is released on Parma Recordings, and it's also available on all of the streaming services: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. Wherever you get your music, you can get this disc. So let's talk about the group for a couple of minutes first. So you put together the Meridian Arts Ensemble in 1987. You just give us a little backstory on your reasons for putting together this kind of group and some of the early history of it.
So I got to college thinking that I wanted to play in orchestras. And suddenly I was in a school where everybody wanted to play in orchestra. And the level was, there were some people there that were, going to do it. And I heard them, I talked to them, I listened to them, just as they were practicing. I would listen to people practice walking down the hall. And I realized that that and for some other reasons, that was just not going to be for me. Also, we were in a conductor's orchestra freshman year with student conductors, and it that whole experience seemed to take the fun out of music like immediately. And it seemed like work and pressure and stress, and so I struggled with that for a little while. Like as a student, I left school and I just was like, gee, I'm at this great school, but this is not for me. What do I do? And there was no real at Juilliard at that time. It was kind of like you go the orchestra way or you go the highway. There weren't really any other things where you could really sort of sink your teeth into. Paul Zukovsky was there, and he ran the contemporary ensemble, and that was great. And he was an excellent mentor for tackling that kind of repertoire. But it was a school ensemble. It was nothing really we could take with us when we left as an ensemble. I think some of us, like Greg Evans and Wayne Dumaine, Ben Harrington, those of us that were all in those groups, we sort of developed an aesthetic working with Paul about contemporary music, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. Um, but orchestra was not going to be for me. So um, there was a guy that I knew from the Empire Brass Camp in high school named Rolf Hawley. He called me up that summer before I was going to go back to college. and said, "Hey, I'm going to Juilliard. Let's start a quintet." We had played in a quintet together in high school. And I was like, "Great." So we got a group together. I think I called Ray. Ray knew Ben, and Tracy was at Juilliard, and we just started playing together, and it sounded good, and we were having a good time.
So, just to clarify for people who may be watching, brass quintet is two trumpets, French horn, trombone, and tuba.
So we put that group together, and then I felt like for the first time in my college time that I had a reason to play the trumpet and to practice. Before that, I was doing all that stuff because, well, this is what you do. These are the solo pieces you play. This is the orchestra music play. This is the repertoire. And honestly, like none of it really spoke to me at all. I mean, I loved listening to it, but sort of banking your career on the possibility of playing Schubert's Unfinished Symphony like 95 times, it just wasn't interesting to me. So, and I was not cut from the same cloth as, Michael Sachs was at Juilliard when I was there. He was like ready to go get a job when he was a student, and he did. So I just kind of knew that that wasn't for me. So it was really about finding something that, with the music gave me a reason to work, to practice, to improve, to play with players that were better than me. That was the other thing. I was not very good. I had a very good day at my Juilliard audition, and we'll just leave it at that. Um, it wasn't even a very good day. Maybe they needed bodies that day. I don't know. But having a reason to play was what got me going. So I was able to sort of pull that together. And then, we had some personnel changes. Shortly after that, you joined the group. And, but it was like a belief system. It was like, I'm going to just try to focus on the music that I like, that I think is interesting, and try to find people who also agree with that.
What did you find interesting about that music? And we're talking here mostly about contemporary music.
Well, and like brass music specifically. So if you turn on the radio and some brass music comes on, it's either going to be a Christmas carol, a march, or Barber Adagio for strings arranged for a brass ensemble, kind of all like that. But growing up in high school and definitely when I got to New York, listening to jazz and rock bands that had horn sections. So like I remember when I was very young hearing Sly and the Family Stone and seeing a clip of them on TV and being like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like that music is great and they got horn players and look at how the people are responding um but I was also into Jimi Hendrix and Zeppelin and Yes and King Crimson. So I was like more interested in that kind of music, like new music that was a little bit off the line from everything else that was going on. So I think that carried into, you know, what I was into. And then when I got to New York, um, there was a tuba player in New York that I used to hang out with, Marcus Rojas. And he was from New York. He had gone to college in Boston and then went back to New York. And he was very much in at the beginning of what they called the downtown music scene at the original Knitting Factory. Frank London was there, Steve Bernstein was there, Matt Dario, Knitting Factory Records, Josh Roseman, just a lot of really interesting musicians,
So this was a
improvising music.
sorry to cut in, but this was a different kind of new music than the classical music world had known in the 60s and 70s, which was a very
Right.
academically rigorous kind of 12-tone music, very what it came to be called very uptown scene of music that was not necessarily audience friendly. And were you finding that you and other potential audience members were drawn to the music that was being played downtown? Did you find it more listenable, more approachable, more exciting?
Not necessarily. I think the Uptown moniker didn't get named that until there was a downtown scene. And yes, in the academic scene, before the downtown scene, well, and we'll put a pin on that because we can go back to that. Um, the uptown scene was interesting. It was didn't really hit a very wide audience. And a lot of what was going on in New York in the classical slash academic scene at that time was actually probably more popular in Europe than it was in the States. You know, like a guy like Morton Feldman, he couldn't get a cup of coffee in the States, but he would get big commissions in Europe and go over and do these residencies and they'd play his music all over the place. So, um, I think the downtown scene was like more that it was our generation, and sort of that generation's take on what music is, what it can be, and sort of questioning a lot of the rules that had been sort of put up before that. Now, before the downtown scene, you had a music called jazz, which was the real American new music because you had all these heavy composers, players living in New York, composing music that was using improvisation and composed elements and playing it in clubs for no money, sometimes getting beaten up by the cops after a gig, you know. You read about what Miles and Mingus and, that generation, Monk, what they went through, but they were doing new music. That was a downtown scene. But I think it was called jazz, maybe because, I don't know, it could be put in a category. So, but I sort of think of that as that was really the beginning of the downtown scene, you know. But look, you didn't have civil rights until 1963, so the society was very segregated at that time. Um, and the music, how it's categorized, how it's named, that's has a segregationist tone to it, it still does.
Also, in the days of record stores, you needed categories. You needed short, pithy descriptors for any kind of music, so you could put the recording of it in a bin.
Right. So, but yeah, so anyway, that downtown scene, I thought it was more of a generational thing. I felt like I would like to hang out with those guys. I would like to play the music that those people are writing. I would like to be in those groups. I want to go hear those groups. And because those were the people the same age as I was. So
So you got some people together to play in the brass quintet. You named it Meridian Arts Ensemble, and talk about the first couple years.
first couple of years we did mostly weddings and parties. But it was a way to it was a very sort of, I don't know. It was the way to subsidize what we were really going after, you know. And sometimes we'd pull out something a little challenging on a party. Let's play this and see if anybody notices. They're all drinking like they're not paying attention. Um, but yeah, it was mostly doing that, but with the point of going forward with the group, not just, we're not just going to be a gig band. But the gigs definitely kept us afloat. Like some of the other guys, they were getting some nice gigs in New York. I was not. So those gigs for me were very important, economically. Um, and that, also the fact that those gigs were so crappy sometimes, people are nasty and drinking and it's just not where you want to be doing your music. You're going to music conservatory. This is not what you signed up for. that was a motivation to like, let's improve our situation here so we don't have to do this anymore. So then we started doing some competitions, and that was good. The ones that we lost, I think, were, well, the ones that we didn't win anything were important lessons. And for me personally, for sure, as a player. And then we had a couple where we did all right, and those were good. And that was at a time where, um, you know, I think we just kind of got in under the wire, honestly. Like if we had done Concert Artists Guild 5 or 10 years later, I don't know if people would have been interested in that, what we were doing. Because as time went on, I think, and we experienced this, it's not just about the music, it's about the presentation and the image and what you wear and this and that and all, this kind of stuff. The pictures, we spent a lot of money on those pictures. And look, that's what you got to do. But I think, when we won, we were solidly committed to the music.
So I
So,
came on board in 1989, and the group was already playing some pretty heavy, big contemporary pieces. We were playing the Ira Taxon Brass Quintet, the Etler Brass Quintet, Seasons by John Stevens. Those were some of the first pieces I played with the group. In 1990, we won Concert Artists Guild. The Zappa House concert was in 1996. So we got to figure out how do we get from a group that's interested in downtown music, that's playing contemporary music, that's a brass quintet, that's just won a competition. We got to get from there to an invitation to play at the Zappa House 6 or 7 years later. Get us
Mhm.
there.
well, so when you joined the group, we were kind of rolling, right? And like you said, we were playing all these big pieces. Um, Something that occurred to me very early on, maybe even before you joined the group, was there were a lot of really good pieces that had been written for our instrumentation, but nobody was playing them. When I was a kid, grew up in Boston. I used to go hear the Empire Brass Quintet, and they were still playing a lot of those big pieces. They used to play the Etler, they used to play the Ira Taxon, which was written for them. Um, I think Ira was a classmate of theirs at Tanglewood when they were youngsters. Um, but nobody was playing those pieces. And I was like, well, somebody's got to do it. And I like the way that stuff sounds. And so that was kind of like the first jump. Then we were, going on that. We're like, oh, we got to find some other music. So we found some good arrangements of some old music. And then uh, one day I brought in, I think you would have been in the group at this time. I made a little transcription of a Cream song. And I can't remember what it is, what the song was. And I passed it. I was like, hey, let's see what this sounds like. And it was no drums or anything. And the way Ray played the bass line on the tuba was like, I was like, damn, that's like the right feel for that tune. And so then we started fooling around with arranging rock tunes, and Ben and I were playing salsa band gigs. So we started fooling around, doing some of those tunes. And then we were handed a cassette of Frank Zappa's music by Michael Bernstein, who was a friend of mine, not a musician, but like encyclopedic knowledge of music. He turned me on to a lot of music, hundreds of pieces and composers. Um, and then I was like, oh my God, this music would totally work for us. And for a while, and I still do it, when I hear a piece of music, my first question is, what can I do with that? Can I put this in some other kind of context where I can play it? or have somebody else play it, or and so that's what we did with Frank. And then we sent him a cassette with the first CD. That was, let's see, he died in 93, right? In January 93. So this is probably like it was New Year's before we went to see him the first time. So it was probably New Year's like 92,
92. Yeah, yeah.
right? And
So our first two CDs had come out at that point. The second one had a Zappa set,
the
or maybe the
first one
first one.
had come out when he called. He
Right.
called,
He had heard, listened to the Taxon and loved
right?
it.
Listened to the cassette, and then he said, "I listened to the CD. It sounds great." He said, "There's one piece on there." He said, "I couldn't find my glasses." He said, "There's one piece on there. It's about 10 minutes. Best brass piece I ever heard." I said, "Ira Tax," and I said, "It's kind of like a little Varese type." He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah." That guy lives in New York, and Frank was like, "That's a great piece." So I told him we're going to be in LA playing, I think, the Ambassador Auditorium or something in, I don't know, March or April, a few months later. "Do you want to come to the show?" He said, "I can't come to the show, but you guys can come to the house. So call me when you get here." So we called, we went over. I remember you were the first one there because we arrived like in different cars, and you were there and you were unpacking. We walked in, you're like, "I saw Frank."
Hmm.
He just walked in and said hello and then left, right?
Yeah,
When you
well,
saw
he
him.
was still on his feet at that point. He had a big beard,
Yeah,
seemed tired but alert.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then so we played for him, and that was pretty cool. And then
If I'm remembering right, we did not have John Ferrari with us. We were playing
correct.
just
Just
we had he had joined the group by then, I
right.
think, just barely, because he wasn't on the first. He was not on the Smart Went
He was
Crazy
not, I
CD.
don't think, well, I don't think we recorded that. Had we recorded that at that point? Was it? I don't
Uh,
remember the exact
Maybe not.
timing, but
Maybe yeah, it's
I
hard to remember.
don't remember. But when we went to see him the second time, he
He
said
had
there was a
listened.
mistake on the CD.
Right. That
I
was
was
on
like,
Smart Went
what?
Crazy. That was like a 64th note. That was
I
the
was
wrong
like,
place.
so broke my heart, but like even like as he was, days away from death, he wanted it right, which was his thing. It was like, oh, there was a mistake on the CD. It's like almost perfect, but not quite. So then yeah, and then we went and saw him the second time.
Well, let's go back. I remember him telling us that we could play anything we wanted in his catalog. And I remember we were throwing out
Yeah,
tunes. He was like, "Yes, yes, you can play that one. You can play that one. You can play anything you want to play," which was great because you always worry about playing somebody else's music and are they going to be into it, especially with such a different kind of a group because we were a classically grounded group that was branching off into rock and roll music and playing those pieces that had been recorded by seasoned musicians from LA, probably mostly, who made their career playing that kind of music. So it was very reassuring that he was so supportive. And now you're frozen. There you are.
I I think okay, I think we're unfrozen now. Um so when he called me that time we talked on the phone that one time, he gave me a list. Well, I asked him, "Can we commission you?" And he said, "Well, even if I had time for commission, you couldn't afford it." Um, so he said, "But, you should play my pieces." And I was like, "Okay, which ones do you think?" And he told me, and I was writing on the back of an envelope, like Echidna's Arf was one, Marcuson's Chicken, bunch of the stuff that we ended up doing later. The Black Page. The one I didn't get to do was music for guitar and low budget orchestra. Um, And then when we went back to play for him the second time, I don't know if you remember this, he asked if we had done that one, if we had it. And I said no. He said, "Oh, too bad." It's like, damn. It's like guy's on his deathbed and I'm just failing here, you know? So,
That second trip was about 9 months after the first one. And he was bedridden, as you point out. I mean, literally on his deathbed. And we gathered around. Um, I think we did have our drummer. I think John Ferrari was there. I can't. Frank asked us to play. We were nervous about playing in a small room. We were loud, and he said, "No, it's okay. Play all out." I can't remember if John did any drumming on
John
top.
didn't drum. I think he was with us.
Mm-hmm.
But we just sat up around the bed.
Yeah, and we played our second set, which was the went on to become the set from Prime Meridian.
Right. Yeah. He liked those. He liked the Kid Nazarf. He thought the breathing was impressive.
We were
So,
young men.
well, and I had sort of disguised the breathing places very well, and everybody had, it was like a seamless thread, like as if it was him playing it on the guitar.
What gave you the idea that you could arrange music? I mean, that seems kind of bold.
Um, well, my dad was a band director. So I have memories of the dining room table being covered with staff paper, with my dad making some kind of arrangement of something that was not published, but it was a tune that he wanted to do with his high school band. So that was just kind of like something you do, you know?
So the fact that you were arranging music was what gave me the idea that I could arrange music. So
Uh-huh.
this kind of thing gets passed on. And eventually we all started arranging music because we all were getting that idea. And then writing music because
Yep.
once you're sitting there with staff paper, it's a not that big a leap to actually creating your own music.
And brass players, we play a lot of arrangements. A lot of them are not very good, but okay, so we know what works best for our musicians. Let's arrange it for ourselves. And I think that was, I think Frank saw in us like he could see like we were kind of scrappy. There was no glam with us. We were just this rogue chamber music group that was going around the United States playing this music and just trying to do it like at all costs. And that's kind of what his early bands were like. And a lot of his guys couldn't read music in the early days. So, then as time went on, he got people who were more accomplished readers, like George Duke and Ian Underwood, and everybody could pretty much read, you know, as time went on. Um, he asked us, I remember the first time we went, he asked us, "Where are you guys staying?" And Ben said, "Oh, Motel 6 in El Monte." And Frank just kind of like did a side eye and went, "They shoot people there." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, we're on a budget." And I think like that gave us some cred with Frank. He was like, "These guys are not staying in nice places. They're staying in shitholes. They're just like trying to get through the next day to the next gig. And I think that was kind of, obviously the quality of what we were doing. Um, and he felt it was like, he knew firsthand it's a pretty big undertaking to take a group that is not sort of fitting into any category out there and trying to make money doing it, right? So the musicians can get paid. So
I,
yeah,
I
I
think we
feel like that was part of like what he saw in us, as a mentor.
I think that the work ethic that we had developed, because in those early years, my beginning years, 89, 90, 91, we were rehearsing around 15 hours a week. We were really rehearsing, 5 days a week for 3 hours, something like that. And we had a really high standard for what we did. And even though he, I say even though, so I'll say it, even though he was a rock musician, he had that really high standard. There was no even though you're a this or that musician in real life. It's just, are you a good musician, and is your standard incredibly high? And I think he responded to the kind of precision that we were going for, but also emphasized style and character. I remember he wanted us to be goofy with his music, which was really kind of antithetical to the playing the Ira Taxon brass quintet, but also a really good lesson for us in trying to like pack our performances with that which would interest the audience.
I think the character thing, that's a good point. And I think, like you say, for some of the music we played, that kind of thing was not appropriate. But we did, even in a piece like the Ira Taxon, there might be a passage where you want to go for some almost a comedic approach to a phrase and see if you can get a rise out of the other guys in the group. And I think that's kind of like also connected with that, like the character. So it got to, as we got further down the road, I think we were pretty much over the top with the character, with everything at all times, you
But
know?
of course, as you know, when a musician feels like he or she is playing with tremendous, maybe even ridiculous exaggeration, that's when it's just coming through to the audience because they're not inside our heads, and the world of sound is much more abstract than the world of what we see or speech. And so we learned early that musical communication has to be exaggerated in order to reach its target, which was to
Mhm.
get people to engage with whatever you're trying to say musically.
Yep. Yep. I think so. And that was good. You remember Norman Yamada's piece that we used to play?
Yes, I do.
We'd play on a concert, and one person would come up to me and say, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. And then somebody was going to say to you 2 seconds later, what was that awful racket? I've never heard anything so disturbing in my. So I guess we sold it, right? We either you're going to like it or not, but we were pretty clear in what we were putting out there.
Right.
So yeah.
So now we're at 1993. We've played twice for Frank, and he has just died of cancer of basically everything by this point. And we still have to get to playing a house concert in 1996. So those years are really a blur for me because we were on the road a lot. We played a lot of concerts. We had a lot of different repertoire. We did a lot of teaching on the road, master classes and stuff like that. But how did we get to an invitation to do a house concert?
Well, we also cycled through quite a few trumpet players too, because I think people maybe saw that it was like, oh, I like to play in that group. And then they got in and they're like, oh, I don't think I want to play in this group.
Well,
And then,
because the group didn't sound the way it did because we just like to have a good time. It sounded that way because we worked our butts off.
and we remained friends with those players. I think that we were, we were just trying to keep it going, trying to put it together. I always felt like once around that time, like maybe around the time, a little before Frank died, I felt like it was always crisis management. Just what's the next thing? We got to keep doing this. And we ran it hard. We recorded one year, we recorded 2 albums, I think, you know, um, of like vastly, like we do like a 90, I don't remember. We're doing them like every like 8 or 10 months or something for a few years or something like that.
And there would be one that would have drums with a lot of rock and roll and some jazz and Latin pieces, and then a Renaissance one. And then our album called Five was very contemporary music-y. And
Uh,
so there was a lot of stylistic crisscrossing.
yeah. So after Frank died, there was a lot of awareness about him and his music, and I think we probably, for lack of a better word, benefited from, you know, our
The
short
Zappa moment.
relationship with him. And
Right.
yeah, it's the Zappa moment for us.
You and I did
Um,
the interview on Weekend Edition or Morning Edition or something like that on NPR.
Mhm.
Get some publicity.
uh, yeah, we were on Weekend Edition twice, I think. So, yep, we were getting some success. We were very busy. And then whenever we were in LA, I guess we would call Gail and say, "Hey, we're in town." And she'd say, "Okay, come over." One time we went over there, she said, "Can you guys bring ice?" So we had to stop and bring some ice. And um, the, there was, I guess, 95 was probably the time. One time we went, I remember Wayne was with us.
All right, so Wayne Dumaine was playing with the group at that point. He played with
Up,
us for about a 6 month period
up,
before Joe Bergstaller joined the group. Is that right?
up,
Yeah.
yeah. And so Wayne was with us and we went. I mean, Dweezil was working on something. We recorded something for him.
We recorded Sofa. We did a little version of Sofa, I think.
Right. And I think I made the arrangement like,
You made it there at the house before we recorded
oh,
it.
I think Ray and I drove around and I found a cassette at a record store and transcribed it in the hotel room that night or something and made an arrangement. And then we also in the studio we recorded some tracks, which are I think you said they're going to go up on the website.
Yeah, let me jump in because those tracks are expected to be loaded onto Meridian Arts Ensemble, all one word.com, very soon, and they will be available. And uh, we recorded them in Frank's studio. And was it Spencer Chrislew who did those recordings with a very simple setup? So I'm going to announce on Facebook and on our website when those are available, but it should be very soon.
Yeah, those were good. So we did a little recording session, um, and then and there were some of Frank's pieces on there. And then I remember, I don't know, we were kind of left on our own, and Ray and Wayne were playing basketball in the backyard of Frank's house. And I don't know what was happening. We were just kind of hanging out. And then when we went back in 96, that was again called Gail. We were going to be in that area. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, why don't you guys, do you want to play a little concert? I'll invite some people over." So great. So we went and there was a ton of people there. Not a ton, but it was nice.
25, maybe 25 people. Um,
Yeah, family and friends.
yeah, I think Diva Zappa was there, I think, and Amit, and maybe Dweezil, I can't remember, not Moon. Um, and some other people who are going to figure into this story were there as well.
Yeah. So then we I don't know, we just made a set. I was thinking that was like our fun program because we were also dragging around the Milton Babbitt, the commission pieces, the Milton Babbitt, David Sanford, Tom Pearson. We had like four or five big contemporary pieces of living composers at that time that we were playing. And but this was like our fun stuff, the short pieces, the rock pieces. Um, and we played. And then there was, I'm glad it was documented because a lot of times you play a really great show and it's like, okay, can we get the recording? And it's like, oh, we didn't turn it on, or whatever. Um, so it was nice to have a document of that, you know. And then we just left and we went on our way. And that CD, I don't think I even listened to it. I might have listened to it once, a few years later, but it basically sat in a box because the mentality was we just keep going. We're not thinking about the past.
But to step back just a little bit, the microphone on that was the big house concert that ended up on this
Hmm.
present CD. And Markson Coy, as in Markson's Chicken, was there, one of the guests, and he set up a mic, single mic, and recorded the concert and mailed it to Ray or you,
Yep.
one of you, and
Yep.
there it sat
Yep.
in its jewel box to be rediscovered 30 years later.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was Frank's live sound man, I think. So he was, put up one microphone. He knew what he was doing. He got a great sound.
Yeah, and we did play part of our Zappa set. I'm looking at the box here, and we did play Markson's Chicken to
Hmm.
be recorded by Markson, and we played a big Zappa set with 6 tunes, 7 tunes. We played a little Latin music. We played some King Crimson, which we had gotten into at that time, and we played couple of pieces by you, and a piece by Joe, and a piece by me, and a piece by John Ferrari, our drummer. So we were really exploring our own music at the time as well, and we played some Scarlatti. So it kind of shows the range of what we were up to at the time, and have kind of made a career out of being up to gathering all those kinds of music and saying what unites the music on this program is that it's good.
Exactly. That was always our criteria, right?
Right.
If it's good, we'll play it.
Yeah.
Or at least we'll try to play it.
Yeah. So that's
Uh,
kind of the origin story of the CD that's just come out. Um, and you were listening through some old CDs that you found on your shelf 30 years afterwards or something like that. And you found this thing and you listened and you called me up and you said, I found this thing and I think it sounds pretty good. And we started talking about releasing it.
yeah, it was actually in a box of stuff that Ray left. Ray, I still have a couple boxes of cassettes and CDs that Ray had. And when he left the area, he was like, "Hey, can we keep these here?" I was going through them, and I was like, "Oh, I
So
remember."
Ray Stewart, our founding tuba player who retired a bunch of years ago, and has been replaced by Tom Curry, who's also my college here in Wisconsin at the University of Wisconsin. Um, and yeah, so you listened to it, and we thought, let's get this thing out if we possibly can, and we started thinking about who owns this music, who owns the rights, and we had to deal with that, which was a very complicated story, which we were able, fortunately, to resolve with the help of Universal Music Group, who had since then acquired the Zappa catalog, and they approved our releasing this album. Um, and then it was the regular business work of taking something from being a private CD to actually engaging a label. We did no mixing at all. There was zero mixing done. There was a tiny bit of mastering done, and all the only mastering that was done was that the left right profile was sometimes a little bit off, and they centered everything. That was the mastering. So basically, what's heard on this CD is what was heard in the room. And then we had one more really fun thing that happened when we played at the House of Blues, because that was after all of that, right? Or no,
No,
that
that
was
was
before
before
all of
that.
that. So let's
That was
talk about that one too.
that was connected with the 1995
That's
visit.
right. With right,
So with Wayne,
right. So Wayne
we
Dumaine was playing with us. We did these little recordings, and
yeah,
did we play another house concert?
I
Did
think we did.
we
We
did
probably
because
did.
yeah,
That's where we met Warren Cucurullo. He was there. There were
exactly.
other, yeah, I think we did play a little recital.
Yeah. And Warren
And
Cucurulo came up to us afterwards, and he was playing with Duran Duran, right? He was music directing their reconstituted group, playing. They had recorded an album of covers. And why don't you take the story from there?
so he invited us to join them at the House of Blues the next morning. It was like we had to be there at like 7:45, be at downtown LA, early in the morning because it was a morning radio show. And it was just him and Simon.
And
And
the drummer.
no, the percussion player was Joe Travers, who was playing in Dweezil and Ahmet's band at the time.
So he sat in for that concert,
He came and sat in with us and played a little hand percussion.
right?
He's the archivist for the Zappa, all the Zappa stuff, and the vault, and he's still doing that. I mean, they're still releasing stuff. It's wild. Um, but Joe was the drummer for Dweezil and Ahmet's band at the time. And yeah, and then we had a little rehearsal backstage with Warren, and we played on the House of Blues stage, which for a classical contemporary chamber music group was kind of fun. And yeah, that was good. Those kinds of things were very good exposure for us. We reached people that we would not have otherwise reached.
Yeah, definitely.
And I
It
think
was
that's
not our
maybe
regular audience.
a, a point. Yeah, and I think that might be something, for young musicians to think about. Like, it doesn't really matter where you play, as long as you play. And sometimes it's good to get out of the traditional contexts.
Yeah. One of the songs that they had recorded on their album and were playing at the House of Blues and asked us to join in on was 911 by Public Enemy. And I remember we ran through the tune, and Warren said, "Okay, and here you'll play something." This is like 20 minutes before the show was starting. So at this spot, you'll play something. And we worked up an
Yeah.
arrangement right then and there and tried to memorize it. And I remember thinking, wow, a lot of the world works this way. They're not working off of printed music. They think of what to play, they remember it, they go out on stage and they play it. It was a mind-blowing experience for a classical musician used to reading contemporary music off of published parts.
Yeah, yeah, and that was probably the hardest thing for me, was like, oh my God, there's not going to be a chart. What do I do?
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So, but it was fun. It was valuable, and it's just another little opportunity that somebody gave us, and I think that was I mean, we only had those few interactions with Frank, those two times we played for him, but having his blessing, it's like having the blessing of a wise old sage in your field. He wasn't that old, but he was at the end of life. But getting the blessing of like the heavy established composer, I feel the same way about Milton Babbitt, it's like those guys were good by giving us their seal of approval, you know. Getting that from a composer is that's why you do it, if because you respect their music and they see that.
Yeah. But it also helps boost your confidence when you go on stage and play their music.
Absolutely. So I mean, I remember, we all have moments that we remember when we were actually playing in a concert. And I have memories of that concert. Um, and maybe it's been triggered by listening to the recording a couple of times before we put it out. But I remember like playing things and being like, yeah, it's no problem to play any of this music for us, for me, from a technical standpoint. We just get up and we just go. And, I looking back, I kind of feel like that was one of the peaks of the group musically because we're on the road so much. But we didn't know that at the time. You only know
You were
that
just
going home.
tired.
We were just tired and pissed and had a chip on our shoulder. And, you know, there was a lot of, it was just, I can't believe we did that, you know? Um, but listening to it was like, wow, we sounded really good. Maybe some of the best playing we ever did that was captured on a microphone. Um, but at the time, you don't think about that. It's also kind of connected with this discussion we would frequently have about going back and playing the old repertoire. And I struggle with that. I still do because I feel like you do the repertoire in that time and it's relevant in that moment for you as a musician. This is why I could never survive in an orchestra more than like 6 months. But then to go back, there's a question of the relevance, you know. So music that we played in 1991, when you get to 2001, I feel like, okay, it's good. We sounded good. It's good music. I'm just not there right now. You know, it's almost like the music stays in the same place, but you move. Does that make sense?
It does, but then you let another 20, 25 years pass, and at least for me, it's been kind of classicalized. So, like, this is the old, this is the biblical repertoire.
It's
Uh,
like classical music now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's like that last version of King Crimson, that was kind of like an orchestra,
yeah.
you know, with three drummers. This is epic group, and they're basically playing the hits from 50 years of King Crimson, you know? It's like, yeah, they can create new music, but there's such a back catalog. It's insane, right? Yeah, so that's like you say, it has become classical, you know?
But in a
Um,
good way, also. Like, I don't, tonight I'm going and rehearsing the Rosencavalier Suite by Strauss. And I am really looking forward to going and playing
oh
that. Because
yeah.
the old stuff is the stuff that lasts through time is the good stuff.
And I like the old stuff. Don't
And
get
I
me
love it.
wrong. I just felt like I have, and this is probably more of a me problem than anybody else. I struggle with going back and, you know, oh, let's play that again. You know, I certainly with the group, it was always about we got to go forward because I don't know. In the back of my mind, I always felt like it could stop at any moment, and then when it stops, it's over. So then you can go back and look in the back catalog. Um, I've had this conversation with my colleague and dear friend Eric Huebner about university administration. That when things are good and you have the blessing of the upper administration to move ahead with new things, hires and initiatives and program revisions and whatever, you go 100 miles an hour until you get a phone call, at which point they're going to tell you, okay, this all stops. And we're going back to, you know, hunkering down, sharing services, you know, these kinds of buzzwords that are going to be like, you know, we're just going to hold in place. Um, and I think that that's, you know, it's always out there. It could happen.
Well,
So,
I think one of the lessons of that is when you can go 100 miles an hour, you go 100 miles an hour and you don't think about crashing the car, you just think about going.
right.
That was one of the things I got out of working with Frank. He went and he was a famous rock star and an amazing guitar player and composer, but really sitting in a room with him, he's a guy who works his ass off and goes and goes and goes and pushes and pushes and pushes. And that was kind of cool. And I bet you would see that if you could go back and meet Mozart or Brahms. They went and went and went and went and went. Or some of the early jazz players. I mean, wouldn't it be great to talk to Clifford Brown, greatest trumpet player of all time? There is a YouTube You can hear it on YouTube. It's a recording of Clifford Brown practicing, and he sounds amazing, and he's playing a million miles an hour. But he's like everyone else. He plays and makes a mistake and goes back and fixes it, and that's what we do in music.
Yeah. And I think Frank's work ethic was that was big for me and it was big for the group. Um, Not that we didn't have a good work ethic, but I think it brought things into focus because, again, there was a purpose behind it, that we're trying to do something different. We're doing something that's a little bit unusual, um, but we're doing it. It's a belief system. It's not like you're going to play four shows of the Beethoven cycle this week. And then, and I think also that the other thing that was missing from the traditional classical education system for me was when you go to conservatory, they say, oh, you're artists, the art of music. We're not artists. Classical musicians are not artists. We are bringing the art to life so that the audience can appreciate the art of the composer. You can play artistically, but we are not artists. We're not creating something out of nothing here. That's what the composer did. And I think, in the traditional sense, in classical music, whether it's imposed by management, administration, or the market, there's not a lot of choice in what you play. So us having the choice, the decision was on us really about what to play. Sometimes it was hugely successful. Other times there were epic fails. We just that's going to happen, right? But having the choice of what to play and how to play it, we were not micromanaged by a conductor, and we were not beholden to the acoustical properties of one particular concert hall. We had to be flexible and we chose all that music.
And
Once in a while we had to play some, oh, you got to play this piece. Okay, fine, we'll do that.
but also we all became composers over time.
Right. And
And I
so
never really thought about it at the time, but I think what you're talking about, of wanting to be a more central force behind the generation of what's going on stage, must have been a motivator.
I think also we were out on stage and we realized, oh, there's a space in the concert program for a piece like X, you fill in the blank. So you think about the first piece that you wrote, Zen Monkey, was like an 8-minute piece for brass quintet. It was not, like the other music that we were playing that was maybe the older music, that was tonal, but it was not as off the wall as some of the other things, but it was still rhythmically challenging. And you wrote a piece that was for the players in the group for a specific purpose. And I think that's why those things that we wrote were successful because we saw being on stage, seeing all these pieces that we're playing from the inside gives you a sort of a window onto like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I could do this. So it's like taking the arrangement one step further.
And just as a little shameless plug, Zen Monkey, that piece that you're talking about is on the Zappa House concert, played live.
You play that piece a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, well over 100 performances, right?
Yeah. So,
So
in conclusion, tell me, see if you can distill any of the other inspired lessons you drew from our work with Zappa. What might that be? Does anything come to mind?
yeah, so I'm 59. I'm now 7 years older than Frank was when he passed away. So I think about that a lot. And, after he got home from the 1988 tour, he pretty much had decided that he was not going to tour anymore. Now, he had made that decision in the past on a couple of occasions. Said he got home from tour and just was like, that's it, I'm not doing this again. But he did end up going out on tour. But when he got home from the 88 tour, he was content to stay home, write music, make music, and do it all completely on his own terms without having the possibility of a tour on the horizon. And, what I got from that was it's okay to stop all the running around. Now, I'm not Frank, and I'm not producing anything remotely productive at this point. But, I feel like, he sort of gave permission to like, yeah, it's okay. Like if you're tired of going on the road and all the hustle and everything you got to do to like get it out there and booking the dates and arranging the musician, if you're tired of all that, you don't have to do it anymore. And I kind of feel like that's nice. My stress level's way down. And, it's allowed me to rethink what I'm going to do with music at this point. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but that's probably good because everything has been so methodically planned out since I started the group that it consumed me. And there are even like extensions of the group, like this other group that I had, the Genkin Philharmonic, which kind of consumed me at a certain point and has consumed me over time in various stages. I'm just, that's okay, Uh, yeah, it's good to not have to go on tour, especially in the winter, you know.
I hear you.
We're, we're getting too old for that, and we let the young ones go out there. And I think it's good for young people to start groups and make music that's original and unique and just play it anywhere. Like it doesn't matter where you just play it anywhere. Anybody who will listen. And even if there's like three people there, still do it.
Great advice. John, thank you for talking to me.
Thanks for talking to me, Dan, after all these years. I appreciate it. This conversation's actually probably been one of our longer conversations.
But
Um,
a good one.
Very always good to talk to you, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.